Welcome, folks. Glad to have you with us this evening. We're going to take a minute or two and let people come in from the waiting room, and then we'll get started. We appreciate you taking the time to spend with us today. You're just joining. We're just waiting for a few more folks to come in. Well, it looks like the numbers are starting to taper off. So we'll give it another 10 or 15 minutes or so, and then we'll get into our presentation. Or 15 seconds, not minutes. All right. I'm seeing numbers start to taper off. So we're going to start this this presentation by doing a poll that Casey just put up for you. You all have a chance to fill in where you're from. We would appreciate it. Once again, if you get a chance to fill in that poll, that'd be great. And then we'll jump right into our featured presentation for the evening. All right. I think we're probably set there, Casey. All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming again. We really appreciate it. This is going to be an hour-long presentation and discussion about the Aquatic Species Restoration Plan. Looks like we've got folks from around the basin, Lewis County, Thurston County, and Grays Harbor. Not seeing any representatives from Mason County, and one person from outside. So that's great. We've got a good variety there. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Casey Hart, who's going to give us some background on how we're going to operate Zoom today. And then I'll give some quick introductions to who you'll be talking to. Casey, take it away.
Thank you, Nat. Hello, everybody. Just a couple of reminders as we get going about Zoom. Just note today, the webinar is being recorded and all attendees are muted. If you have any technical difficulties, you can email me at chart@rossstrategic.com. You can enable your live transcripts at the bottom and also listen to the Spanish interpretation if you would like to. We will have time for question and answer. There's a question and answer box that you can put questions into during any time of the webinar today. You can submit these anonymously, and then there will be designated times when these questions will be answered. As you can note, the raise hand feature is disabled until the end. When we do question and answer, we can turn that on. And you can hit *9 if you would like to do that verbally. And that's it. Back to you, Nat.
Thanks so much, Casey. So we are talking about the Aquatic Species Restoration Plan tonight, and we've got speakers from both the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife and from conservation districts around the Chehalis Basin. From the Department of Fish and Wildlife, we have Victoria Knorr, who is the ASRP Program Manager, Drew Mueller, who is the ASRP Implementation Manager, and Selena Abercrombie, who is the Chehalis Basin Strategy Manager. From the Conservation District side, we have Bob Amrine, who is with the Lewis Conservation District, Kiana Sinner, who's with the Thurston Conservation District, and Anthony Waldrop, who is with the Grays Harbor Conservation District. And Bob, Kiana, and Anthony are also the regional implementation leads for the Aquatic Species Restoration Plan. Next slide, please. The Aquatic Species Restoration Plan is a part of the Chehalis Basin Strategy. I work for the Office of Chehalis Basin. My name is Nat Kale. I am the principal planner there, and we help to implement the Chehalis Basin Strategy, which is a science-based collaboration of community leaders, local, state, and tribal government officials, local residents, scientists, business owners, and nonprofit organizations who are committed to making the Chehalis Basin a safe, healthy, and abundant place to live for people, fish, and wildlife. Together, the Chehalis Basin Strategy partners are taking action by helping residents and communities protect their homes and businesses from flood damage, working with landowners to slow harmful erosion and restore habitats for salmon and other aquatic life, and preparing the region for more frequent major and catastrophic flooding. Next slide, please. Since 2012, the Chehalis Basin Strategy has invested $152 million across more than 140 projects that benefit both people and aquatic life. After a decade of necessary science-based research and collaboration to build a strong foundation, the number of on-the-ground projects has ramped up significantly in recent years and will continue to grow. These include projects like our early warning routes and early flood warning systems, flood protections for homes and businesses and critical infrastructure throughout the basin, raised farm pads that safeguard farm livestock and farm equipment, fish passage barrier corrections that have opened up more than 100 miles of salmon and steelhead habitat, and over 80 habitat restoration projects. And you can find more projects, these and more projects, at our website at chehalisbasinstrategy.com. Now I'm going to turn it over to Selena Abercrombie, who's going to talk about our agenda for the day.
Great. Thank you very much, Nat. So for today, we are going to start out with some frequently asked questions, and both Victoria and Drew will talk us through some of those, followed by some project examples shared by our conservation district partners. And with that, we'll also speak to ways that you all can get engaged and involved in the strategy. And then we'll end with an open Q&A. And as we're going through tonight's presentation and discussion, I will be putting some things in the chat, like the questions that you hear, so that you can see them as well. And I'm going to do my best to help address any acronyms you hear and spell those out. And so with that, we are actually going to launch one more quick poll. And what we'd like to find out is how familiar you are with the Aquatic Species Restoration Plan, or ASRP. After you fill out that poll, we'll take a quick moment and look at the responses, and then we'll stop the screen share and we'll move right into our time with Drew and Victoria. Great, I'm seeing all those responses come in. All right, it looks like we have about 28% that are very familiar. We have around 45% that are somewhat familiar with the Aquatic Species Restoration Plan, and about 25% that aren't very familiar. So with that, why don't we jump into our discussion about what is ASRP? So with that, Drew and Victoria, you want to take it away? And Casey, could you kindly stop the screen share?
Hi, everyone. I'm Drew. I'm the ASRP implementation manager. I guess to get us started, I think Nat kind of talked a bit about this, but Victoria, could you tell us more about how the Aquatic Species Restoration Plan fits into the larger Chehalis Basin strategy?
Yeah, sure. The Chehalis Basin Strategy funding is split almost equally between flood damage reduction efforts and aquatic species habitat restoration. So today we're talking about the Aquatic Species Restoration Plan, or ASRP, and that's the habitat component of the Chehalis Basin Strategy. So this plan is managed and implemented collaboratively by the Confederated Tribes of the Chehalis Reservation, the Quinault Indian Nation, state government agencies, local organizations like conservation districts and nonprofits, restoration practitioners, and technical habitat and species experts in the basin.
Oh, you mentioned habitat. I thought that the ASRP was another salmon restoration program.
Well, our strategy in ASRP prioritizes the needs of the most at-risk species in the basin, including spring Chinook salmon and the Oregon spotted frog. The ASRP goes beyond a single species focus to holistically approach aquatic habitat and provide uplift for a whole host of species in the basin. The ASRP builds on the success of established programs like the Salmon Recovery Funding Board by also providing a built-in pathway to learn from innovative experimental projects, and by supporting projects that aren't necessarily focused on salmon spawning habitat, but located in areas important for other aquatic species, such as amphibians. The ASRP also complements other funding sources that focus on more specific aspects of salmon recovery, such as the Brian Abbott Fish Barrier Removal Board and similar federal programs. The ASRP contextualizes those targeted efforts and facilitates larger restoration projects that enhance the value of improved fish passage by providing additional overall habitat improvements up and downstream.
But how do we know that habitat is the right thing to be focusing on? Aren't there other limiting factors?
Yeah. There are other factors that may be limiting salmon recovery in the basin that are being explored in an ASRP adjacent effort under the Chehalis Basin Strategy. So these threats include hatcheries, hydropower, harvest, and predation. But research in and out of the basin have shown that habitat improvement is an essential ingredient for the success of any strategy aimed at recovery of aquatic species populations. So the ASRP has been set up to specifically focus on this ingredient. And while the ASRP is focused on habitat, it does remain connected with other components of the Chehalis Basin Strategy as part of a coordinated approach to providing significant gains in the short and long term. As Nat mentioned earlier, when he introduced the Chehalis Basin Strategy, the strategy uses an integrated approach to address the connected challenges of aquatic species habitat and major flooding. Often we can do both better by addressing them at the same time. A healthier habitat will also have an improved capacity for natural flood storage, for example.
Why is the government making all of these new regulations?
Well, the ASRP is entirely based on voluntary participation. So we rely on trusted partners and community-oriented organizations in the basin, such as conservation districts and nonprofits, to reach out to landowners and work with folks on the ground to meet the needs of both the landowners and the species and habitat. Because of this framework and built-in collaboration, all ASRP projects are able to provide measurable benefits to both landowners and the habitat. So, measurable benefits, can you tell me what are some of those benefits for landowners? What kind of landowners does the ASRP work with?
Yeah, there are a lot of different reasons why a landowner might want to participate in the ASRP. We work with public entities, farmers, foresters, and many residents who have lived here for generations. Many of us who live in the basin are here because we love the wildlife and we have similar concerns about conservation and just need some support to do this kind of work. We often work with residents who have generations of land stewardship in their family and are excited to implement the latest restoration methods. But many others have pressing concerns with flood damage and losing land to bank erosion. We are often able to find mutual wins, improving habitat while also addressing flooding and other concerns for landowners. For example, bank protection and erosion can be addressed through a variety of methods. Multiple ASRP projects make use of large log structures that create more attractive habitat types within a stream, including spawning areas, cozy cold water holding pools, increased cover, and increased food availability. But these same log structures can also deflect water away from important areas on a property. And with some other landowners, we include large plantings of trees and shrubs along streams, which not only cool down the water and create that high quality habitat, but also help stabilize the banks from erosion.
That's pretty cool. Are there any other incentives available for landowners?
Yes, there are a variety of incentives built into the ASRP. Most directly, acquisitions and conservation easements can provide payment to landowners in exchange for habitat protection or use of land for restoration projects. We can also make small improvements to a property during the restoration construction process, leaving the land better than we found it. As a program that relies on voluntary participation, we know that the most valuable incentives are those that protect residents' ability to live the way that they want to live with their preferred lifestyles and livelihoods. So we are currently in the process of more explicitly building out our incentive program, and that is one of our primary goals in mind.
That's awesome. So, how much will this cost taxpayers? Like, is this a good investment?
Well, currently, the ASRP receives about $10 million a year in state funding for implementing these kinds of projects. But achieving our overall goals will cost far more even than that. Right now, we focus on process-based restoration, which works with natural processes to minimize construction costs while maximizing the longevity of a project. It is a lot less expensive to let a stream move around sediment than it is to move it around with construction equipment and dump trucks. That said, some of our projects can still be very expensive because there is a lot that goes into planning a multi-million or multi-mile river restoration project that allows for both public safety and dynamic river processes. For this reason, we have begun a process to streamline applying for federal funding so that the state is not supporting these efforts alone. It's also important to remember that most of this money goes back into good local jobs. We're working with local contractors and field workers while building capacity at nonprofits and other organizations in the basin. This is a large investment in this region that we hope will benefit everyone for the foreseeable future. All that said, though, what does the ASRP have to show for all this work that's been done?
Yeah, the ASRP in its current form is a relatively young program. So our current plan didn't come out until about 2019, 2020. And we know that even in the best case scenario, it will take time, at least decades, to ultimately see a higher abundance of, for example, salmon on a regional scale following habitat restoration, especially because salmon are sensitive species with complex life cycles. Before our current iteration of the ASRP, we were partnering with other programs, and between 2015 and 2019, we corrected 54 barriers, which increased access to 87 miles of stream habitat. Now, using our salmon population monitoring results to date, we can't really say that all those older projects resulted in a specific number of additional salmon every year. It's very difficult to keep up with the pace and scale of human development and climate change. And it's also very difficult to tease out the impacts of a specific project from external factors like climate change and human development. The current version of the ASRP advocates for increasing the pace and scale of restoration so that we're moving beyond maintaining the status quo, and we can actually start increasing the population levels. Though, as Drew mentioned, that would require a large amount of additional funding. Good news is this work isn't happening in a vacuum. We're also coordinating with partners across the basin and throughout the state to find where we can come together and build complementary pathways toward recovery. It's not just addressing fish barriers and habitat complexity, it's making sure there's enough food for fish to eat. It's looking at predation impacts, harvest management, hatchery operations, dams. There's so much work that needs to be done. It takes all of us to do it. And ASRP is just one of those ingredients. So, Drew, let's talk about what's next.
Well, right now, while the ASRP is in this growing phase, we're very much leaning into finding more landowners to work with and develop new projects. We'll be coming out with some more focused local strategies soon that will help us deliberately and efficiently move towards our programmatic goals. And just a bit, I'll turn it over to our conservation district representatives. We have Bob, Kiana, and Anthony here, who can talk about work done recently in their areas of the basin. So I think we'll start with Bob in the upper watershed and then work our way down towards Anthony in the lower watershed.
Yeah, thanks, Drew. So I'm Bob Amrine. I'm the district manager at the Lewis Conservation District, and I am here to tell you all about a specific project that we did in the upper Chehalis Basin, specifically on the West Fork of the Chehalis River. So the project was called the Marker 19 Oxbow Project. We sponsored it in direct cooperation and partnership with Weyerhaeuser. The falls you see on the screen now was created approximately in 1960 when the road was being built to log the area. About 1,500 feet of the river was cut off. So, and this waterfall was created with dynamite. So the river could flow that way, and they didn't have to build two bridges to go up into the upper watershed to log the timber. So Weyerhaeuser came to me and asked me if I would sponsor the project to put the 1,500 feet of channel back in operation and construct two bridges over the site to get to the upper watershed. So this was a no-brainer for us as a conservation district to open up the habitat for the salmon species, specifically here, coho and steelhead. So as I said, it's a fish passage correction. It's on the west fork of the Chehalis River. Where you see the red dot on the bottom of the map, that map is the complete Chehalis Basin. In the middle on the left is where it goes into the Grays Harbor, and the dot is in the it's past PL in the very upper watershed of the Chehalis Basin in the Willapa Hills. And we removed road fill to open up the oxbow and to reconnect the oxbow to the main channel, and put in 2 bridges. Originally, they were proposed to be 90-foot bridges, which ended up being 100-foot bridges to make sure they were secure for the future of the logging industry in the area. And here's a really good illustration that shows the old channel. The old oxbow is in the bluish purple that was reconnected. And where you see the cross hatches was on the road that we decommissioned, and the red is the new road. And then it shows the spot where the new bridges were put in, and that where the falls is there on the bottom right, that is kind of in between the 2 where the oxbow goes in and comes out. And that was plugged up significantly, so the river will have no way of going back that way again. It is being forced to go back into its old channel and open up that 1,500-foot channel for it's a lot more natural and fish habitat for migrating upstream to some really good spawning habitat and rearing habitat. So the project was funded over 51% by Weyerhaeuser. It was a very expensive project, of course, but it was well worth it for the fish and the future of the fish in the area. Total project cost, as you see, is about a little over 1.2 million. The ASRP grant funds were 545,000, just a little over. We were funded in 2000, and the construction was completed in 2021. As I said before, it opens up over 7 miles of high quality habitat. The pictures you see on the top is one of the bridges being installed. In the bottom, we put a lot of wood in the channel that was opened up, that 1,500 feet. Really good story about this is the first year after the project was completed, we had coho coming through this channel and above the channel. So it was a almost immediate success for improved habitat and to create more fish naturally. And that's all I have. I'll turn it over to Kiana from Thurston Conservation District.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kiana Sinner, and I work for the Thurston Conservation District. And today I'm going to be highlighting a restoration project on the Skookumchuck River. So you can go to the next slide. This is a project that's located just north of Bakota. You can see the little reddish circle there that shows the approximate location of this project. The Skookumchuck River is a really neat river that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It's a tributary of the Chehalis River, and it's home to really several very important aquatic species, and including several species of salmon. So this project was over 74 acres and contained 2,600 feet of river shoreline. So it was quite a large project and a big undertaking. But this property had some challenges, which made it a really great site for a restoration project. So there was some significant riverbank erosion that was taking place, and it was resulting in the loss of land for the property owner. There was also huge amounts of invasive weeds like blackberry, thistle, and reed canary grass, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. And they had those, weeds had taken over many portions of the property. And there was also a lack of healthy native trees and shrubs along the river, which is a really important, they're really important to create shade and keep the water cool for salmon. And so if we go to the next slide, we'll see a couple pictures. So in the first picture there, you can see some of that intense erosion that was happening. You can also see the large amounts of reed canary grass and the lack of trees along the river. So if we go to the next slide, so one of the really important parts of this project and the kind of the neat parts of it is that it was really driven by the landowners' interests and goals for their property. So they had a large chunk of land, this 74 plus acres, and a ton of appreciation for its natural beauty. They really wanted to see their little pocket of nature restored to as close to its natural state as possible. And they wanted to ensure that it would be preserved forever. So when we started thinking about how to move forward with this project, we really made sure that the landowners' goals and their interests were forefront and were really the focus. So the next slide, we will see that this project was a collaboration among many, many partners, but the main partners that really helped make this happen were, of course, the private landowner who owns the property, the Conservation District, Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, and Capital Land Trust. And so to meet the landowners' goals and to solve those challenges that we just talked about, there were a few main components that were implemented on this site. So to date, and we're still working hard on this project, but to date we have over 20,000 native plants that have been installed on the property. So you can see in these pictures, there's they are all tons of them out in the field, and along the river here, we've got willows that are starting to bud out. We've also removed a significant amount of invasive weeds. Large woody debris, which you can see in the bottom picture there, has been placed in the river, and this really helps to slow the river down, which can help manage erosion and can also help create deep pools of water, which are really important habitat for salmon. The landowner also opted to have a conservation easement placed on their property, which means that this beautiful tract of land and all the work that's been done to it is going to be preserved forever. And so that's a really neat part of it. And so if we go to the next slide, here's sort of a aggregation of all of those really important outcomes that we're seeing from this project. So it's really exciting, and ultimately it's resulting in healthier habitat, enhanced stream flow, and it's also supporting the preservation of this really ecologically significant land. We're already seeing wildlife and aquatic species like salmon using these spaces. This photo here is a really nice picture that one of our restoration crew members took of a few spawning salmon last fall near one of the engineered log jams. So in the coming years, we are really looking forward to seeing the impact of this project grow. And we're grateful that we've had the opportunity to work alongside this amazing landowner and the partners to make this project such a huge success. So now we'll head down the river, and I'll turn it over to Anthony, who is going to talk about a project on the Satsup River.
Thanks, Kiana. My name is Anthony Waldrop, and I'm a project manager for Grays Harbor Conservation District. And I'm going to be talking about an upcoming project. So this project has been funded by the Aquatic Species Restoration Plan and is going to be implemented over the next couple of years. This is a drone shot of the project looking upstream on the Satsup from this winter. Next slide, please. This project is located just upstream of the Highway 12 bridges. So if you're heading out to Ocean Shores or Westport and you look and you cross the Satsup River and look upstream, this project is 2.5 miles of river upstream, working with couple different private landowners, some agricultural landowners who run some livestock businesses, and some people who have homes as well in that area. So a lot of great landowner partners, and this the Satsup River is a very productive salmon stream, but also is in need of some restoration to increase that productivity and to reduce some of the impacts to both the aquatic species and the landowners that live along there. Next slide, please. This is the extent of the Instream part of the project, shows the bridges and also the ag land partners, a really fertile valley in the lower Satsup River Valley as it goes down into the Chehalis. So some of our most cherished partners are the agricultural landowners who are really great stewards of their land along these floodplain areas, and come to the table to work on these multi-benefit projects. Next slide, please. So some of the issues here that we are dealing with are similar to Kiana's project. There's rapid rates of erosion. The landowner, one of the main landowners along this stretch of the river, had a riparian buffer that was established along the river, and over time that riparian buffer has been washed away, and now it is eroding through her farm fields. And as Drew mentioned, some of the techniques that we use can be both really good for fish and really good for landowners, and so it was a natural fit to bring this landowner alongside us to figure out a project that could help with her needs, as well as help address the aquatic species issues in this area. Next slide, please. Here's an example of some of the riparian trees and shrubs habitat. It's a little bit hard to tell, but on the picture on the left is a plant species called knotweed, which is very prevalent throughout the Satsup River and many river and streams in the Chehalis Basin. And it's an invasive exotic plant that can take over a riparian area and prevent trees and shrubs from getting established. All it takes is 1 inch fragment of it that gets washed downstream, and it can get reestablished and continue to grow. So it's a real big problem in a lot of our river systems for establishing large trees and a healthy, diverse riparian ecosystem that can both hold the soil together, hold the banks, provide large wood when trees fall in, and provide habitat for fish. So a big portion of this project involves dealing with these invasive plants. Next slide, please. One of the main project actions, as I mentioned, is installing engineered log jams. And these are, as many of you know, wood floats. So if you put a log into the water, it will float away if there's a flood. And because we don't have large old growth trees anymore that would fall in and are heavy enough and big enough to stick and provide bank protection, we work to engineer something that approximates a large log jam, and we put them in places that are strategic, that both address the erosion and connect the floodplain to provide better habitat for all the aquatic species, and not just the salmon, that rely on connected floodplains, that rely on side channels, that rely on habitat diversity. This picture is from a project on the Wainuchi with the installation of an engineered log jam with heavy equipment. Next slide, please. This is the bottom half of the project, and it's an aerial map that shows all of the different log jams that are being planned to be constructed. Some of these log jams are on the gravel bars to help split flow and spread the energy of the river out to reduce that erosion and provide a lot of different micro habitats for salmon and other aquatic species. Some of the engineered log jams are along the eroding banks, and they help to reduce that erosion and allow trees and shrubs to get established to provide long-term habitat benefits as well. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned before, a big component of this project involves riparian plantings and invasive plant management. This is our crew planting willow stakes upstream of this project on a different project. And the planting plan on the right shows I believe it's over 200 acres of riparian plant management to set this reach on a trajectory of a healthy and diverse and resilient system for both aquatic species and for the landowners. Next slide, please. This project is going to start construction next summer on the west side part of the river. And because we're dealing with a big dynamic system, we'll be actively managing this and keeping an eye on the project for a number of years to make sure that the project is working right, that it's doing what's intended. And that's why we have engineers helping us with making sure that these structures are safe for river users, or as safe as can be for river users, and that we are making sure that they're doing what they are supposed to do. Next slide, please. And our timeline for the planting and invasive management goes for about 10 years or 5 to 10 years as we manage those plants to get to a healthy spot where they can maintain themselves. That's the ultimate goal, that the project is that it helps maintain itself with those natural processes. Next slide, please. Finally, this is an aerial image of a project upstream on the SATSIP from this current project, and it shows sort of a desired outcome for this SATSIP 2.5 project, where you have split flows, multiple habitat types, erosion has been reduced, plants are getting established, and a much more diverse, healthy habitat for both the aquatic species and the humans. I think that's it for me.
Yeah, thank you, Bob, Kiana, and Anthony for sharing those 3 projects. So the ASRP has a lot of different projects in our portfolio, but we don't have time to share all of them today. So I really appreciate the conservation districts coming to this webinar and sharing those 3. Each of those are, they're pretty different. They're on 3 different rivers. They're all very large. They're with 3 different types of landowners as well. But what they all have in common is that it's the type of funding that's available through the ASRP that helps that scale of projects get implemented on this kind of a time scale. So now we're going to talk about what's next for the ASRP and how to stay engaged. We have a variety of projects going to construction this summer, highlighting 6 on the map here. There's the Wildcat Creek barrier corrections, the Schaefer Creek restoration sponsored by Grace Harbor Conservation District, the Stillman Creek early action reach sponsored by DFW, went to construction last year and will be hopefully wrapping up this year. We have phase 1 of Riverbend Ranch, sponsored by Thurston Conservation District. We have an Oregon spotted frog project called Blooms Preserved, sponsored by Capital Land Trust. And we have several beaver dam analogs sponsored by the Wild Fish Conservancy and DFW that are going in on timberlands this summer. And if you have any questions or if you're interested in learning more about the ASRP, you can reach out to that email address. And if you have questions that are more general about the Chehalis Basin Strategy, then you can reach out to the info@Chehalis Basin Strategy. And of course, if you're a landowner, you can reach out to your conservation district representative. We have 3 of them here, and also have one for Mason Conservation District as well. And the Chehalis Basin Strategy website has a lot of great information for both basin residents and for project partners, and just general information about the ASRP and other Chehalis Basin Strategy projects as well. I think I'll turn it back to Selena, who will get our Q&A started.
Great. Thank you, Drew. And thank you, Bob, Kiana, Anthony, and Victoria as well. Some really great information that you all shared there. I want to open it up for questions now. What's on your mind? Is there anything here that piqued your interest? Perhaps you live on the Skookumchuck River, or the East Fork Satsop River, or the West Fork Chehalis River, and have some questions about the projects you just heard about. We'd love to know what's on your mind. So I'm going to pause for a moment and let folks put their questions in the chat if they have any. Wow, it's so quiet. I feel like everyone's satiated, but admittedly, I kind of have a couple questions that I would love for our conservation district partners to answer. So let's say I'm a landowner that's just not quite sure what I want to take on, but I'd like to have somebody come and look at my property and maybe walk and talk a little. Could each of you just describe how somebody would go about reaching out and starting that conversation? Anthony, you go first.
Yeah, thanks, Selena. So the conservation districts are unique in that we have a lot of different programs, including the ASRP that we work under. And if you live along a river or a stream and you want to know, what you can do there, you can go to our respective websites and fill out a TA request, technical assistance request form. You can and someone will follow up with you, or you can reach out directly to myself, Bob, or Kiana, and we can set up a site visit to go look at your property, talk about your goals and your priorities for your land, and develop a plan, whether that's pursuing a project funded by the Aquatic Species Restoration Plan, which can be as simple as a planting and to as complicated as a multi-year project that involves engineering and a whole lot of seeing our friendly faces helping you along the way. And we can also, work with farmers on different programs as well that we can direct them to farm assistance programs. So there's a whole lot of programs out there that conservation districts have at our fingertips to assist with.
Thanks. Kiana, could you say a few words?
Sure, definitely. Yeah, so similarly to what Anthony just said, we offer site-specific guidance and technical assistance as well. And so if you live in Thurston County and you're interested in receiving support from the Conservation District, you can reach out to myself, or you can visit our website, and there is a phone number or a general email address that you can reach out to. We also have other staff listed if you'd rather reach out to them. And something that's really unique about conservation districts, and what makes each of our conservation districts a little bit different, is that they are really respondent to local needs. And so they all have a little bit different programs that really fit the needs of our specific communities. And so what Thurston Conservation District offers is going to be a little bit different than what Grays Harbor Conservation District offers over on the coast. So we that's kind of a unique thing, but we're here to help you meet your goals, like Anthony said, and are able to really support that in a lot of different ways.
Thanks, Kiana. Bob, could you say a little about how to connect with Lewis Conservation District?
Yeah, thanks, Selena. You can contact us via phone or via the website. We have a way to offer, or you can request technical assistance. It'll come directly to me. We have resource technicians and specialists in riparian, plantings and farm planning, and we will come out and assist you as we can and see how your property fits in, what you want and what we want. Sometimes people get impatient with us because we do get a lot of requests, and we ask people not to be impatient, to be patient, because we're there to help you, but sometimes it doesn't just fit exactly what we're doing right now today. And I think that's super important for people to understand. We try to work with everybody, but of course we just don't have the manpower and the Army to do that. So we help where we can, look for the funding to try to address, the people's needs and the resource needs on their properties. And if it's a win-win, we go after funding to see how we can do to make it successful for them and the resource. And we're here to preserve the quality of life for future generations in Lewis County.
Thank you all so much. And there's contact information and a number of links that have been thrown into the chat too. So in case you forgot any details, don't worry, we're here to help you out. We do have one question. George asked, is there size limitations in the small scale? And Drew, I see that you might be typing an answer. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to tackle that question for us.
Yeah, this is a great question. So no, there is no minimum or maximum project size for the ASRP. We're always looking for larger projects or ways to link up multiple smaller parcels to create a larger project. But if a smaller project is in a high priority location and matches the goals of the ASRP, it would still have a good chance of getting ASRP funding. And I'll note that there are also other funding sources available depending on what types of project activities you're doing. So that's something that your conservation district could really help you match up what you want to do with the funding source. But yeah, in summary, no minimum project size for the ASRP.
Yeah, and along those lines, I don't think we have a limit on the kind of activity necessarily either. So if someone's just interested in planting some trees and providing some shade, we're happy to help with that. If you have a culvert that might need to be improved or upgraded, we can look at that too. And if you're interested in doing something larger, we're happy to talk about what opportunities might exist for the landowners and help out aquatic species. Any other questions from our participants? Right. It's pretty quiet in the Q&A, which is okay. I guess with our couple minutes left, I'd like to ask all of our panel members here, is there anything we missed and might want to say more about? Bob, what's on your mind?
Usually I don't get too excited about talking about stuff like this, but I do like the opportunity just to let people know. Sometimes people don't understand all the things that the conservation districts can do for them. The ASRP is a big project task for us, but we have multiple other things that we do. We offer manure spreaders for really low cost lease per day to spread nutrients. We have the poultry equipment available for people to process chickens. We have multiple things available, new no-till drills to if you want to reseed pastures without having to working them up. But our focus right now is with salmon restoration because of the concern with the spring Chinook in the Chehalis Basin, the upper basin specifically, and what Thurston's doing and what Lewis Conservation District's doing to help that species will be a benefit for them, and hopefully we can keep them off the endangered species list. I know they're being looked at to be put on the ESA or the endangered species list as threatened or endangered, and we really don't want that. So whatever we can do to help that benefit the species, we're here to work with the landowners to do.
Thank you, Bob. Anthony, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I just want to add that, we live in the Chehalis Basin, which is such a unique and special basin, not only on the aquatic species side, but the diversity of agriculture, cranberry, shellfish, livestock, row crops, and the diversity of communities. And it's really great to be able to work with our partners and with our landowners and communities. It's not just on aquatic species things, but to look at the broader community, to look at adding resilience and look towards the future for providing healthy habitats and healthy places for people to live and work and play. So it's just really special to be a part of it and to be able to not just do projects, but to work with people who are stewarding their lands and be like, you don't need a project because this is really good habitat. Everything is looking wonderful here. So just an honor to be here and participating.
Thanks, Anthony. Real quick, I have a couple questions. They're coming in, so let's jump on one of these. One question is, how do you ensure public safety on the rivers in the project areas such as the SATSOP? Many people recreate on the rivers, fishing and boating, for example. Anthony, could you speak a little to that?
Yeah, so as part of the design process, we have to go through permitting with the Department of Natural Resources, which has jurisdiction on the rivers, and they have guidelines for making sure that any structures placed in the rivers have I'm not sure on the exact numbers, but a sight line for boaters, and aren't, putting in a channel spanning log structure that's going to obstruct and create issues for floaters, for recreational users. Rivers are a naturally dangerous place, whether there's wood in them or not. And so we know that we're never going to reduce the risk or reduce the risk completely out of a river. So I think it's providing good signage at all of our boat launches about these projects, about the reasoning for these projects, and to be on the lookout for them. And then if there are dangerous situations that pop up down the line that are related to the project, being responsive to address that. So it's a really good question. It's on the top of all of our minds as project sponsors, as we are increasing the complexity of these systems, are that it may make it a little bit more difficult to boat around these areas than before.
Yeah, thank you for speaking to that. I think that's really important and something on everyone's mind. We have one other question that I wanted to bring up. And that is, can landowners sponsor projects, or does it have to go through a CD or an NGO or nonprofit? How complicated is the funding process? So Drew, maybe you could speak to kind of who could be a sponsor and the funding process in our last minute or so.
Yeah, that's a great question. So to become an ASRP sponsor, we have an application process that so far we've done once a year, and that's open to government agencies and nonprofits and land trusts. So not directly a landowner, it's more targeted towards organizations that are going to be doing like taking the lead on multiple projects. So a landowner would get involved by reaching out to one of those sponsor organizations, of which we have about 20. So all the conservation districts, DFW, Ducks Unlimited, Trout Unlimited, organizations like that. And in terms of how complicated is the funding process, I mean, everything's relative, but one of the main goals of the ASRP is to really streamline that funding process. So most projects, from when they first apply for funding to when they actually receive funding, get through in about 20 weeks to maybe 30 weeks, which is like half to a quarter of the time to other similar programs in the area. So we're pretty happy about how that's working so far. That said, we're still a new program, so there's absolutely room to make that even more streamlined. And so I guess just to reiterate that main point, if you are a landowner and you want to get involved, first stop is one of these three people, Anthony, Kiana, or Bob, because they're in addition to being with the conservation districts, they're also the regional implementation team leads. We've broken up the basin into 3 regions, and just to kind of help there be a one point person that's more geographically focused. So these are the 3 point people for the whole basin. And there's also, of course, the Chehalis lead entity as well, Thurston, who would probably tell you to talk to one of these 3 people.
Awesome. Thank you, Drew. I know we are at time. I guess I would ask one of our event support folks, is it okay if we respond to one more question?
Please do.
Great. Okay. So Linda puts in the chat, she says, I noticed that the CFS at Grand Mound was about 435 CFS today. This is early in the year. Will there be an issue in stream flows later this summer? So this is a unique or kind of different question. So let's see here. Victoria, do you want to try to tackle this one?
I can give it a shot. I, of course, don't have a crystal ball. But yeah, we have seen low flows in the summer in recent years. And so it would not be surprising if that becomes an issue this year as well.
Yeah, one of the things we are noticing with climate change is just this change in our weather patterns. And what we're seeing is warmer surface water temperatures, particularly in later summer, early fall. We're also seeing those stream flows drop quite a bit, which can be challenging for salmon who want to migrate upstream. So that's one of the things we are working on with the Aquatic Species Restoration Plan, is looking at shading those waters and finding ways to cool them. And then also, is there a way to keep more water in the system during summer when it needs it the most? So yeah, those are very real issues. And thank you for bringing that question up. Right. Well, it looks like we've managed to work through the questions, but I just want to make sure that you all know if you have another question, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're here to help. We'd love to talk with you. And we really appreciate your time tonight. So thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.